Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing with our series of shirim on the unknowable head, the Reishad Loas Yada. And today what we're going to be discussing is really a hakdama to one of the essential points in the secret of the Reishad Loas Yada, which are the sveikos that are found there. The doubts that Rav Chaim Vital received from the Arizal when it came to understanding the secret of the unknowable head. But today what we're going to speak about briefly is just setting up the orientation and the process of thinking or grasp which is necessary in order to relate to this place of Eloreshad Loas Yada. Now, to be choizer on a couple of hakdamos that we've gone through, because ultimately Ein Beis Medrash B'lo Chiddush, and we're just utilizing the same information that we have to uncover new elements of the Nakuda. But what we've spoken about is that when it comes to the original Sfiros in Olam HaAtzilus of the parts of Arach Anpin, of the parts of Kesser, the highest place in our formation where we can orient ourselves back to the way that the beginning took shape. There's many, many stages to the beginningness of the beginning and how HaKadosh Baruch Hu emerged out of infinitude into finite Kavyachol without either losing its value. But ultimately, the graspable beginning, not the origin, not the thing that rests beyond grasp, which will always remain higher than the beginning, but a beginning, a Bereshis, implies that there's a certain graspability. It's B'chokhmah. The world of Atzilus is already rooted in the world of Chachma. It's something that is graspable. And the first points of instantiation of graspability in that place of Olam HaAtzilus is where we talk about the world of Kesser. And we said that each Partsof has three upper spheres to it. But when it came to the world of Kesser, we find a different type of relationship to the way that we relate to the tippy top point. B'derech klal, we speak about three moichin. We speak about Kesser, we speak about Chachma, and we speak about Bina. And ultimately, we're going to be going from the bottom to the top, which is the way that we grasp things. But suffice it to say, and this is something that we've shown numerous times from the teachings of the Rebbe Shlita, is that everything is composed of and comprised within these three stages of Kesser, Chachma, and Bina, or Bina up to Chachma up to Kesser. That when it comes to the three stages that are really the beginning of the orientation that a human being can have to the grasp of the world of Atzilus, which in truth informs everything above it as well as everything below it. Because each stage in the Seder Shtalshalos is a chain that's reflecting that which came above and expressing onto that which will follow it the shape that it will take. And so, whatever we can extrapolate with regards to one level of the Seder Shtalshalos, in particular Olam Atzilus, we can apply to all of the levels above Kavyachal as well as all of the levels below. When it comes to the Seder Shtalshalos, there's going to be three moichin. There's going to be Kesser, Chachma, and Bina. Kesser is going to be the loftiest place. Kesser is the place where all opposites are unified because both oppositional forces reveal themselves to be working towards a particular expression of unity that without that particular expression and without the willingness of each other expression to work together and acknowledge the difference, yet movement towards the same goal, without that shalom, without that tolerance of difference, because we recognize that there's a unity at the heart of difference, Kesser would not operate. Kesser is the secret of the unification of opposites. It's the unification of the paradox of something and nothing, of ani and ayin, as we're going to see. And then you have following Kesser, you have Chachma, and following Chachma, you have Bina. Now, with regards to the Gimel Ration of the world of Atzilus, when it comes to understanding where we're going to access Reishad Loas Yada, we're going to start from the three Roshin, the Gimel plus Moichin, the three Moichin that the Arizal describes in Shar Yud Aleph and Archanpin, which is what we've discussed already, and it's going to bring us up to the place of Reishad Loas Yada. So we're going to start from the lowest, the place that we can orient ourselves most closely, and that is going to be Bina. The world of Bina is the world of separation. The world of Bina is a world of disparity. It's a place of severing an original whole to bring out particular details. Havanas hadavar mitoch davar. It's the left mind that severs an original unity to reveal all of the parts that compose that unity. But nevertheless, the descent away from the original unity is also a strengthening moment because it enables me to now examine and understand and attune myself to each and every particular so that when I put them back together, I'll have a far deeper understanding. Bina is dinan misabrim minay. There's gevura, there's separation, there's severity that emerges from Bina, in spite of the fact that it still operates in a realm of unity. Because the severity of the mind is the splitting up of the mind from the original postulates into the details that compose it, so that I can then begin to understand the applicability and the various parts. Now, Bina, the descent into Bina, means that I'm no longer operating with the original unified whole, which is why Bina is the Shem Havaya, which represents represents an orientation towards wholeness, but nevertheless, the Nakudos, the way that the shame is going to be read, are going to be the Nakudos of Elokim, which represents severity and constriction and separation, meaning Bina is that operant point where we see how all of the details emerge from a particular whole, as well as how all of the details move back to its original whole. But in the world of Bina, we're still holding in the pratim. That's why Chazal say Bina miklal deta'a, that if a person comes to say that they understand something, then what we assume is that they previously had a mistaken way of understanding it. Not because we're silly and we can't grasp things in the right way, but because in order to grasp something, there always has to be a doubled expression. There always has to be an attempt at a grasp and then a reneging on that attempt at grasp and surrender, finding new grasp. And it's always the pratim, it's the bina, it's the trei kali lo mishtai, it's the split voices of bina that each one cannot be heard together. Each one has to be addressed singularly. Each one has to be appreciated for what it is. In the world of bina, we're operating with that auditory sense of developing my own understanding where I'm no longer necessarily validated by the clear and graspable origin. But now I am in the place of a certain element of concealment. That place, that mind, is referred to as moicha stima'a. Moicha stima'a, the concealed brain, the brain that rests internally within the skull. It's a place of concealment, and within that moicha stima'a, within that mind that conceals the necessity of grasp, which by definition demands a severing of original whole for the sake of developing a detail orientation, which is avanas hadavar mitoch davar, or the emergence of pratim. So in that place, in the Moichas Tima'a, what's mislabish there, what finds itself there, is something referred to as the Butsina de Cardenusa. The Butsina de Cardenusa is the black flame or the hard spark, the origination of Gvura within the mind, in spite of the fact that the mind is still operating in the oceanic sense of oneness. I'm still operating in the place of my own mind, but it's the beginning of the mind applying limitation, of severing reality from its original sense of unity and descending down into the dark spots and the particularization and the measurements and all of these things which can be oriented towards fire. Fire is gevura. It separates things. It marks, it brings something that was originally whole back into ashes. It shows the multiplicity that very often is there at the heart of unity. It's that place of the butzina de cardinusa, the illumination that comes from darkness, because it's not darkness here. It can't be darkness. It's still operating in the place of the moichin of Atzilus, in the place of the moichas tima'a, which is the place that all birurim go to and all birurim are moving upwards from. It's the gate that rests at the tippy top of the process of having moved up from the lower places of ourselves, and it's that point of interface between the limitations of the midos and the self and where we can extend ourselves beyond into the realm of moichim. It's Eim Haban Smecha, the mother, Bina, is always worrying and always focused on how it's going to be experienced down below, which is why it is this dual-way bridge. It's the moicha stima. It's a mind, it's a moichin, but it's stima. It's the origination of concealment of the mind as well. It's a butzina, it's a flame, but the kardenusa of darkness. It's a hard spark. It's the revelation of gvuros in the place where gvuros are not negative, they're not symptomatic of anything other than the infinite power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to allow the mind to constrict itself while still fully expressing its power. It's the koyach of iyun, it's the koyach of focusing the mind and closing the mind off from its expansivity in the oceanic sense, as we're going to see in Chachma, and entering into the particular force of attention in the realm of Bina. That's the Moichas Tima'a. That's the first of the Gimel Ration that we're going to be discussing, and it's the lowest of the three. It's the source of Gvuros, and it's where Gvuros go back up to in order to be Nimtak. Above that is what we refer to as the Galgalta, the skull itself, the expansivity of the outer mind, which might be oriented towards the right brain as opposed to the left brain, which is the Moichas Tima'a, which is concealed within the Galgalta. It's that smaller pocket of the mind that exists surrounded by the Galgalta, the skull, which has that oceanic sense to it, the cerebral spinal fluid, which kind of protects the brain and gives space to more orientation towards Bittul. Here in the Galgalta, it's much more of a ratzon. It's not the application of details. It's much more of an animation towards the unity that rests at the heart of all things. The oimer la galgalta, the process of the gilgul, the secret of how all things merge into one, because ultimately they're coming from the same place. And one drop of water can be transported to another part in the ocean, and it can be subsumed as fully as it was in its previous spot, because the interchangeability of the bittel at the level of the gilgalta and the secret of grasping the chachma of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ultimate bittel, to the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's going to be the moich of Chachma. Chachma is seeing things in its grand unity. Chachma is seeing things at the level of nothingness. It's acknowledging the fact that there is an Echad Yachid and Miyuchad that gives birth to all separation, and instead of staying in the separation in the mind of Bina, which is the moich Stima, with the B'tzina de Kardunusa within it, here in the Galgalta with what we refer to as the Avira Dachya, which is the purified air, the columns of air, the ability to float without the necessity to descend down into particularization or detail, but rather to keep myself open to the fluidity of thought. That place of chachma, that avira dachya, that purified air of bittul, where a person's mind is not complicated in its confrontation with limitation, but rather it sees beyond the limitation. It assumes a steadfast stance that is capable of believing deeply and seeing in the mind's eye the secret of unity that rests beneath all pirud. It's not paying attention to the pirud. Avada, there's the potency of pirud there, because already in chachma there exists a potentiation towards Bina, just as in Bina itself there exists the unity of Chachma, as the Psukim say, Chacham bebina, the light of Chachma as it exists within Bina, which is the unity within the Bittul, and Havein b'Chachma, which is the secret of Bina, the emergence of separation as it still exists within the womb of within the realm of Chachma, which is the potentiality towards separation that exists still in the state of wholeness, which, as we know, in the realm of unity, there's an interconnectivity and an interinclusion between two separate parts, which reveals the inherent unity. So every level has the lower level and the higher level within it. So there's always going to be an interchangeable place where the Bina that exists within Chachma then gets transitioned to become the Chachma that expresses itself within Bina, revealing how these two minds are ultimately connected. The Moyach of Bina, which is separation, Havanas Adavar Mitoch Davar, which is the sense of Ani that rests within the Moichas Tima'a, within the concealed mind, the lowest of the three brains, and then within there rests the potency of the Butzina de Cardenusa, the hard spark, that black flame that has the capacity of orienting itself towards boundary without being a tzimtzum dika person, but rather seeing the boundary as a fuller expression of self, of Ezu Gibor HaKoivesh Es Yitzro, the expression of self that comes about by self-limitation. Then we ascend upwards to the second head, which is going to be the Moich of Chachma, which is going to be in the Golgalta, which is occupied by the Avir Dachya, the purified air that rests within Chachma and Bittul, and it's the secret of Ayin. So we have, when we look at Chachma and Bina, when we look at the right brain, the Gulgalta, and the Avir Dachya, or the left brain, which is the Moichas Tima and the B'tzinat Kardenusa, what we confront is a diametrically opposed system. Chachma is bittul, is ayin, it's nothingness, it's the relinquishment of control completely, it's the recognition of yichud ilah, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the entire world at every moment, as opposed to the moichan of bina, which is the orientation towards ani, which is the secret of yichud tata, which is the recognition that no, I am a self and I need to try and be mavata myself back up to the source. These two modalities, the right brain and the left brain, symptom on the left side and expression on the right side, expansivity on the right side and constriction on the left side, the whole principles on the right side and the particular details on the left side, the vision of the mind, the re'iyah of Chachma that sees all things in one fell swoop, in one glance, and it doesn't pay attention to the separation, that's in the right brain of Chachma. But the auditory sense, the shmiya, which can only hear one thing and one thing alone, the tzimtzum of the attunement of the self, operating on the left side of Bina. These appear to be in stark opposition to one another. Chachma represents Bittul, represents the world of Atzilus. Bina represents Ani, it represents Hishtoikukus and Ga'aguim, the worlds of separation. These two diametrically opposed things, the Moichas Tima'a and the Avira Dachya. The Moichas Tima'a that houses the Butzinat Kardenusa, the realm of Bina, and the Golgalta, which houses the Avira Dachya, the purified air of the mind, which is rooted in Chachma. Now, the Vilna Gaon, Schus Yagan Aleinu, hints in a Haggah in his beer on Safraditz News in the first parak, that ultimately the deepest secret of all things is the unity between the Butzina and the Avira, between that hard spark, that black flame of Bina that's oriented towards separation, as well as that spark of air, which is the Avira Dachya, which is oriented towards Bittul. That in truth, there is a unity between Chachma and Bina. There's always a unity between Chachma and Bina. There's always a unity between unity and what appears to be separation. But we can't necessarily orient ourselves towards how that operates, because when I'm in a Chachma mind, I can't think about a Bina mind, just as the world of Atzilus cannot descend down into the worlds of separation. And when I'm in a Bina mind, I can't think about the world of Chachma, because when I'm in the worlds of separation, I, by definition, can't necessarily be operating with a mindset of Atzilus, which negates all of the concealment of the worlds of separation from the get-go. So there needs to be Shnei Ksuvim HaMachishim Zetzeh, Chachma and Bina. The Bina, again, the Moichas Tima with the Betzina de Kardenusa, and the Chachma with the Galgalta and the Aviradachya that rests within it, comes along the light of Kesser. And as we said already, over here, we only have a Chachma and a Bina of Arach Anpin. We don't have the Kesser. The Kesser of Arach Anpin is in truth the Malchus that doesn't appear, which we said is the secret of the Reisha Deloas Yada. It's the third mind that ascends upwards above the Moichas Tima'a of Bina and above the Galgalta of Chachma, and it's rooted in the place of Keter. And in the place of Kesser, what we understand is that it takes all of the qualities of Chachma, all of the bittul and the self-nullification and the nothingness and the expansivity and the general principles and the vision of Chachma, the world of Atzilus, the refinement, as well as the world of Bina with all of its constriction and selfhood and egoism and severity and constriction and all of those various auditory senses of the application of my understanding of the heart to the content. And instead of trying to make one admit to the other or making peace between the right brain and the left brain, where one is sacrificing part of itself, the light of Kesser is the secret light that balances the paradox and reveals that without the paradox, there would be no upholding of the unity itself, that the unity is a paradoxical one because the only possibility of the paradox is upholding themselves without one giving way to the other, which is more compromise and synthesis than the upholding of a paradox or the dialectics at its standstill, where A informs B and B informs A in their oppositional force, yet they hold each other up in that resistant dance to reveal the secret of unity that comes about mibein shnei hakruvim, from within the concealment of the encounter of Chachma and Bina, from within the betisha, from within the collision between Chachma and Bina, between the Moichas Tima and the Galgalta, between the Butzina de Cardenusa, the dark flame, and or the vessel, which is not really a vessel because it's a revelation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and that Viradachya, the purified air, and the columns of air of unity in the mind, and the Yishav Adas, from within the collision of those two emerges a third principle, which was always there to begin with, which allowed the lower two to animate themselves, which is the secret of Reisha Dlo Isyada, the unknowable head, the third crown, which is nothing but Atik Yoimin, because it's the Malchus of the higher world. Kesser always occupies the revelation that Chokhmah and Bina are unified because it too contains both elements within itself. It contains the Ani and the Ayin within itself. Like we said, Atik Yoimin is really just the Malchus of the higher world, which becomes the Kesser of the lower world. Atik Yoimin is the orientation towards an ancientness which is removed from grasp, that point of limit where my mind can no longer ascend upwards. But at the very same point, it's a relatable past, which means that it's part and parcel of the origin, which means that it expresses itself within the system as well. That place of Kesser, that place of the unity between Chachma and Bina, between the Moichas Tima'a and the Galgalta, between the B'tzina de Kardenusa and the Avira Dachya, is the place of Kesser, of Reish Lo Yada, which is not Ayin like Chachma, it's not nothingness like Chachma, and it's not Ani like Bina, but rather it's Ani ve'ayin bevas achas. It's the two operating at the very same point, where every ounce and every expression of Ani, every expression of Bina is there to motivate a further expression of bittul, of chachma, and then coming to realize that I haven't been mevatel myself yet in accordance with what I truly can be. And so there's a new movement that pushes me further, and it's a perpetual revelation of back and forth at the very same moment, simultaneously, the hishtoikus of bina, the sense of self that needs to be mevatel itself, but that's only there to uncover the deeper revelation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu's light, which is that even in the tnua of the self, even in the movement of the mind and its own independence, that becomes the vessel upon which I can reveal more and more of the dependency of the mind, which is the secret that I don't know anything, I never knew anything, I don't know anything, and I won't know anything. In the realm of Chacham, a person can think that they know nothing. At least I know nothing. I could be mavad to myself. In the realm of Bina, a person can come to think that they know something. They can know yesh. But in the realm of Kesser, it's ayin v'yesh b'vasachas. It's chayav inish lebesume. Ayin yud nun and yud shin, which is ein yesh. It's the secret of v'hanachash hasieni, that the secret of the Eitz Hadas Tovara, which was a pagam in that Kesser, in Reishad Lo Yada, because we tried to demand to know what can't be known, instead of living with what cannot be known by way of grasping it as unknowable. And so Hanachash Hasieni is Osios Ayin V'yesh. It's the secret of Chachma and Bina, as if there's a separation between the Ayin of Chachma and the Yesh of Bina. And then on Purim, where there's a rectification of those mochin, because we reach that place of Adulayada, whether by way of intoxication or by way of sleep, however a person reaches the place of not knowing. And in that place, it's a tikkun of the chet of the nachash, which is hanachash hasieni, which is ayin and yesh, the severance between chachma and bina, and it's the revelation of Chayev inish lebesume beporia ad lo yada. That inish, the ayin and the yesh, the chachma and the bina, the moichas tima'a, which is the yesh, which is the bina, which is the gvura, the butzinat kardinusa, the emergence of concealment and intensity, and the spark that hits when two things hit together, revealing a collision that gives birth to more of itself, as well as the air and the aviradachi of chachma, when both of them, ayin and yesh, are together to reveal that ad lo yada, in the light of Kesser, we reveal the unity between the two of them. Reish Lois Yada is the unity of Aniva Ayin Bevasachas. It's the secret of something and nothingness at once. It's the secret that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is above and is below at once. And that's, as we've discussed, it's the secret of Malchus Hagnuza Beradla, that Malchus, which is the lowest expression, the Yesh, the Bia, the Bina, all of it reveals itself to, in truth, be rooted all the way above in the place of Chachma and above, which is the secret of Ayin, which is the secret of Bittul. And they reveal the possibility of Bittul with Hishtokukus, Bittul with Hishtokukus, and Hishtokukus with Bittul, of being a self that is only there to reveal more and more that I'm not a self, and not being a self that descends down into the sense of being a self so that I can draw it down into the lower places and experience it over and over. The secret of Reishad Lo Asyada is that place, it's the limit point at which the Malchus of the higher world reveals itself to inform us that we know absolutely nothing, and all that we can possibly even begin to know is limited in relationship to that which we don't know, and it allows that notion to descend down into the Seder Ashtalshalis. It emerges as the Kesser of Arach Anpin. It comes down into the world of Atzilus, which is drawing down the lights of an ancientness that cannot be grasped, yet allowing it to be drawn down into graspability. And that's what I want to try and talk about today. Ultimately, all of this is to say that when it comes to Reishad Lois Yada, when it comes to the orientation of the mind towards the Darga of Kesser, so everything about Reishad Lois Yada and the splitness of it and the paradoxical upholding of the unity that exists within it and that unknowability, as we're going to see next week with regards to the Sveikos, with regards to the doubts, everything about Reishad Lo Asyada is expressed and reflected in the way that we grasp Reishad Lo Asyada. Meaning to say, we're going from Baal Shem Tov to Arizal and from Arizal to Baal Shem Tov. From the Arizal, what we're doing is we're discussing the ideas themselves and the shape of the ideas and how they function in an ontological sense. And then from there, we have to go down into extrapolating it into our own minds and to find that place within ourselves, which is the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. How do I experience this? And then once we can understand how we're experiencing it through the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov and the Gra, and then Bebasari Echaz Elokai, then we can go back to the ontology of it. Then we can go back to the Torah of the Arizal and now read it within the Osios while experiencing the thing itself. So it becomes very human and not human at the same time. It's Adam velo Adam. It's the secret of Chachma, which is lo Adam, which is the bittul of the self, and Bina, which is Adam, which is the application of the self, and it's drawing both of them together into the light of Kesser. And so if everything about Reishad Lo Asyada is unknowable because it contains both the limit and the unlimited, it contains Chachma and Bina within it, it contains Ani v'Ayin within it, that means that whenever I'm grasping it in one way, I'm not grasping it in the other way. Because generally speaking, that split orientation of something and nothing, of bittul and hishtoikus, of yearning and trying to let go of all yearning and trying to let go of all identification with self, generally speaking, those two cannot be experienced simultaneously, because when I'm a self, I'm a self, and when I'm not a self, I'm not a self. And it's very difficult to find, or nearly impossible to find, that unified place where both are operating in a simultaneous force. But just as Reishad Lo Asyada represents that ungraspable unity of a paradox that somehow, some way gives birth to more than what it can rationally or theoretically give birth to, so too the mechanism of the mind that needs to access that, because that's the secret of the Reishad Lo Asyada within the self. The secret of Reishad Lo Asyada within the self is coming to terms with the fact that generally, if I live a Chachma orientation, so I'm okay not knowing. If I live a Bina orientation, then I need to know. But those two appear to be opposites. In the light of Kesser, what we come to understand is that I don't know and I know at the same time. I know that I don't know, meaning to say that my not knowing is not an ignorance that reneges on any attempt at knowledge, but rather it's a knowledge that pushes itself to the limit, at which point it comes to grasp that it cannot grasp anything. But that not grasping anything is not ignorance that now deletes all of the previous levels of attempting to know, but rather every element of trying to know the previous process of Bina is now illuminated. Each and every moment of cognition, each and every moment of grasp, each and every prat that we thought we knew is now illuminated to the degree that it exceeds itself, because now all of that knowledge is revealed to just be working at the service of faith, of not knowing. So it is a way of knowing and not knowing at the same time, meaning to say that the only way that we can come to grasp Kesser is to know that we can't grasp it. Unlike things that we can't even know that we don't know, like the infinite itself, Kavyachol. So then the not knowing is not a way of grasp, because I'm simply unaware. I don't know. I have no access to it. Over here, it's the lip of existence. It's the edge. It's the Reshad Lo Yada. It's the limit point at which the mind is forced to bounce back off of itself, back into itself, into the place of Chachma and Bina, instead of running upwards into infinitude, as we're going to see from Rabbi Nachman. It's a limit point that at the same moment I can't reach it, but I reach it and I realize that I can't reach it. And in the realization that I can't reach it, I am somehow reaching it. In this paradoxical place of Kesser and the paradoxical moichin that are necessary to grasp Reshad Lo Yada, there is a shift away from what not knowing is. Not knowing is no longer the negation of knowledge, but rather not knowing is the affirmation and upholding of knowledge. I know it by way of not knowing it. It's an apophatic experience. It's a hasaka b'derech shlila. I come to know what I cannot know. I come to say what I cannot say. I'm saying that I can't say it, so clearly I can't say it, but I'm saying it, which means that even though I can't truly say it, by trying to say it and not being able to say it, I am in one way or the other actually saying it. I'm touching and not touching at the same time. Mati v'loy mati. Generally speaking, we see when we look at the lens of existence through Chachma and Bina, through the Moichas Tima'a of Bina and the Viradachya in the Galgalta of Chachma, so there's mati, there's grasping something and there's not grasping something. There's touching something and there's not touching something. They're two polar opposites that cannot operate in unison. There's knowing and there's not knowing. There's limit and there's unlimited. But in the realm of Kesser, where we reveal that it's aniva ein b'vasachas and it's the yichud of train hafachim on every level, what we come to understand is that tachlis hayadiyah shaleineda, the apex of knowledge, is coming to the recognition that I don't know, meaning it is still an accessible point of knowledge, but the way that I access it and the way I cognitize it is beyond the capacity of cognition, meaning to say the grasp of what I grasp reveals within my mind in a positive way that I don't know anything. It's not a negative form of not knowing, which leaves me empty, but it's a positive form of not knowing, which leaves me full and saturated to the degree that I don't know because I am the thing. I don't know because there's no reference point at which I can take myself away to objectify this thing to try and understand it. Understanding comes from the notion that I stand under something. There's a distinction between the thing and who I am. But in the realm of infinitude, in the realm of Kesser, where we have to be as focused on the unfathomability of all things as we are as to the possibility of the fathomability of all things, in that place we have to hold on to the fact that nothingness needs to be revealed. It's not enough that nothingness erases the mind and sends it into a complete bittul devoid of grasp, but rather here I have to grasp both at the same time. I have to access both. And the way I can do that is by accessing in a positive way the fact that I can't access something, so that I have in my grasp the secret of the ungraspability of things, which means that each and every moment that I grasp, that I can't grasp it, I am animated once again to yearn back to try and grasp it, then to come to the recognition that I can't grasp it in the perpetual undulating process of Ratzav Veshov, Kamari Habazak, of Mati V'loy Mati at the very same time. This moichin, this place, this secret column of Reshad Lo Yada within the mind is the tool in which we grasp the light of Kesser, meaning to say we believe in it and we believe in the graspability even though we don't have anything to show for it. And it's over here where knowledge and faith begin to dance together, where the attempt at yediyah and the recognition of emuna both emerge to be the secret of faith, a knowledge of faith, or a faithful knowledge, which is knowing that I don't know, but still trying to come to that place of knowing that I don't know. Faith is the sacrifice of knowledge for the sake of belief. But in the secret of emuna, in the secret of the malchus agnuza beradla, emuna is not the enemy of yediyah, but rather emuna is the apex of yediyah. Derech emuna b'charti. Emuna is a world of emuna. It's not the negation of content that I cannot grasp, but it's the affirmation of all that exceeds the human grasp and its existence in a real, formidable way that is accessible and powerful and functional, and it does its work, but I just don't grasp it. In that place I live in emuna, the idea of emuna. It's not the sacrifice of knowledge for the sake of ignorance, but it's the upholding of ignorance as the apex of knowledge, at which point I dance like a person on Purim, where all I have is emuna. That amarti echakmeh, I thought I came to know the hiruchayim mimeni. That's still a knowledge. It's knowing what I cannot know. It's a hasag b'derech shlila. It's coming to grasp something by way of negation. Negation is not the undoing of affirmation, but rather negation is a way of affirming something. Very much like the moichin that we've spoken about so often with regards to tzimtzum, that instead of thinking about tzimtzum as the absence of presence, which leaves an empty void in its space with nothing to grasp and only to wish our way back to something beyond, as opposed to the real moichin of tzimtzum, which is the presence of absence, meaning there is something present, yet it appears in an absent form, which means that instead of trying to run out of where I'm at right now in the hopes of finding some secondary form of presence to fulfill the void, all I have to do is descend down into the void itself to reveal that it's just a concealment waiting to be revealed. So this paradoxical orientation towards knowledge, which is that I know something by way of coming to the limit, is the moichin that we need in order to encounter the world of Reish Lo Yada. And nobody describes this process as well as Rabbi Nachman in the 24th teaching of Likutei Maharan. So just to read some of the words without getting too caught up in the explanation or the parenthetical explanation, but just to read what we've been talking about into the words. Rabbi Nachman says as follows. Da sheyesh or. A person must know that there is a light, shehu lamala meinafshin v'ruchim v'nishmasin, that is above the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama. It's above any graspability. It's above panimi. It's above something that can be experienced internally in a cognitizable way. The who or Ein Sof, and that is the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol, which is going to be the secret, as the Gra pointed out, of Reishad Lois Yada. The Afal Pi She'ein Haseichel Masigoto, and even though the mind cannot grasp it, Afal Pi Kain, nevertheless, meaning simultaneously at the same point, Redifa de Machshava Lemir Dafabasre. The running of the mind, the nature of the mind is that it will chase after it with the full knowledge that it cannot know. That's the secret of Afal Pi Kain. Afal Pi Kain and Rabbi Nachman is a hermeneutical gesture which shows that even though postulate A is true, postulate B can be true at the very same time. So even though I can't grasp it, afal pi kain, nevertheless, redifa de machshava de lemir dafabasre. The mind is still yearning and reaching to grasp it. And through the running, as haseichel masigoto. The running of the mind after that which is ungraspable is in and of itself the grasp of the mind itself, but bechinas mati v'loy mati, in the aspect of touching and not touching. Now, touching and not touching, as we've discussed, is one of the fundamental sugyos in the Arizal as it emerges out of Olam HaAkudim, which is really connected to Malchus as it descends downward, as we said, that Olam HaAkudim is the mouth of Adam Kadmon Kavyachol. It's the Oiris Apeh, which we said was the Malchus of Adam Kadmon, which is the second iteration Kavyachol of the Malchus the Ein Sof prior to its expression in the Malchus the Atzilus. And so in the world of Akudim, though, and this is true by the world of Akudim as well, what we're seeing over here is that mati v'loy mati, touching and not touching, seems to be a durational process. Something touches and then it removes itself and it doesn't touch, and something else is capable of touching, but touching and not touching are not taking place simultaneously. Over here, in the light of Rabbeinu, what we see is the bechina of mati v'loy mati is that it's touching and not touching at the very same time, meaning to say, like we said, that I'm touching it, I'm grasping something, but the way that I grasp it is to realize that I can't ever grasp it. I'm touching it. Nevertheless, that untouchability remains in spite of the fact that I'm touching it. It's that paradoxical space where both Chachma and Bina, Aniva Ayin, are operating at once. Bechinas mati v'loy mati, ki be'emes I efshar lahasigo. So, because in truth, I cannot grasp it. Ki hu lamala me nefesh ruach neshama, because it's above. So again, Rabbi Nachman is already expressing two paradoxes at once. He says that in this 3 lines, al yidei haredifa az haseichel masigoto, through the chasing after it, the mind grasps it, in the aspect of touching and not touching, in spite of the fact that in truth it can't grasp it because it's above. So it's above and below at the same time. It's makom ha'aron ena min amida. It's the secret of the kfura of Moshe Rabbeinu, which if you grasp it, it appears that you can't grasp it, and if you can't grasp it, it appears that you can grasp it. V'da, says Rabbi Nachman. She efshar lahasigo so afilu bebechinas mati v'loy mati ella al yedei asiyas hamitzvah b'simcha. And what Rabbi Nachman says is the only way to access this point of Reish Lois Yada, of grasping and not grasping, is through the engagement with practical reality through Simcha. Why? Because Malchus Agnuza Biradla. All we have is what is right in front of us. All we have is Malchus on the lowest level, which will reveal the Ani of it all, the limitation of it all. But it's specifically in that unfelt place, which we don't know that we can't grasp because it doesn't appear to be infinite in front of our eyes, while in truth the shorish of it is, because the shorish of Malchus is in Reish Lo Asiyada. When we engage with Simcha, with positive affirmation and an orientation towards this world, which is saying, yes, we gain access to that place of the unfathomability of Mati V'loy Mati B'vasachas. And Rabbi Nachman continues, and we're skipping a few pieces, and he says that this place of Kesser, this place of Mati V'loy Mati, this place of Reish Lo Asiyada, is the aspect of the Eheye Imcha Ve'evarechacha, that I will be with you and I will bless you. It's always a future orientation. It's I will bless you, because Kesser, the light of Reish Lo Asiyada, is still beyond our graspability, which is the secret that Rabbi Nachman explains elsewhere, is that the crown, Kesser, the highest place of Reish Lo Asiyada, comes from a language of patience, comes from a language of Hamtana, as he describes in the sixth chapter, in the sixth teaching. In Eov, wait for me a little bit. Because when a person tries to access a certain intellectual space of mind to explain something, let me allow my mind to be mityashev. And a person needs emuna, and this is the aspect of the panemius of the mind. But what we didn't focus on, what we didn't say earlier, is that when Rabbi Nachman discusses this nature of the mind to run after something and then to retreat backwards, what happens is that the mind at this point is uncovering the possibility of sparking something to come into existence. The mind is running upwards and then it's retreating backwards. The mind is hitting the ceiling and then retreating backwards, coming to know the ceiling, but also know at the same point that I can't know the ceiling, and then retreating backwards and then trying again. And specifically because I can never fully uncover it, it means that there's an infinite gradation of what can fully be uncovered, so that the motivation towards trying to uncover it more is persistent, even beyond the repetitive experience of not being able to grasp anything. So it's bouncing up and down, and it's these moichin, this running after the Kesser, not being able to catch the Kesser, this orientation that we'll have towards the secret of Kesser, which is above and below at the same time, is what is described by Rabbi Nachman as the ma'akev and the miyashev, that the mind has a limit. There's a ma'akev. The mind is perpetually running upwards to access the infinite. The mind wants to grasp the panemius of Reish Lo Asiyada, which is the secret of panemius ha'emuna, which is the ta'anugim, the pleasure and the sha'ashuim and the playfulness that comes about when any moment in our lives we orient ourselves towards the secret of emuna and simcha, and that secret of being okay with where we're at and trying to work from that place and to move forward. That we hit a limit point. It hits the ma'akev. It hits the ceiling. But instead of us sacrificing our quest and saying, oh no, I can't reach anything, I might as well live without insight, what happens then is that the mind retreats back inwards and it's miyashev itself. And then we gain full access to the moichin of Chachma and Bina. Then we gain full access to the world of the Galgalta with the Aviradachia, the orientation of Bittul and Chachma, as well as to the Mochas Tima'ah with the B'tzina de Kaidenusa, which is the secret of Bina. Only through running upwards and trying to access the inaccessible and retreating backwards with the full knowledge that there is something that will perpetually remain inaccessible to me, that's where I draw down the capacity to be miyashiv my moichin, to elevate now my experience back up to that place of moichin, of chachma and bina, through separation, refining separation, being mavatel it all to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and uncovering the secret of ratzon, of Reish Lo Asiyada, that in spite of the fact that it can't be accessed fully, it is perpetually there. This process of mati v'loy mati, kamari habazek, of the ma'akev and the miyashiv, and being masader the moichin, this is the process that we spoke about last week when we spoke about the spheros of the world of Arachanpin. Every partsuf has 10 spheros in it. The problem with the Kesser of Olam Atzilus, we said, was that it's missing Malchus. And the explanation that we gave from the Arizal is that in truth, Malchus is rooted in the Reish Lo Asiyada. That means to say that in the world of Arachanpin, all we have is 9 original spheros, and the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which expresses itself through Reish Lo Asiyada, which is the unknowability of all things, which then descends downwards to operate as the Malchus, which is the ground of being itself. Meaning to say that the unknowability of the ground of being itself is ultimately deeply rooted in the unknowability of the highest level of Reish Lois Yada. But in that place, the Zohar Kadosh in Parshas Noach and Parshas Bo, as Rabbi Nachman describes, refer to those 9 Heichalin, Deleis Be Heichalin, these 9 chambers which are not really chambers. In the place of Kesser, it's an expression that is not yet quite an expression. It's the process of emergence which is not yet fully emerged. It's a Metzia She'ena b'Metzia, something that exists, but it doesn't yet exist in the way that we typically grasp existence, because it's in the process of coming into being at every moment. The Hamtein, the Ana Zamin Lemeheve, I am prepared to be. When a person accesses Kesser, it's never fully there. It's always the revelation that at the lip of my experience, at the lip of my grasp, there are infinite vistas that remain for me to try and grasp. So it's bittul and grasp at the very same moment. These Teisha Hechalin take place, they form the chamber of the mind to access Kesser. These 9 Hechalin, which are not really Hechalin because the ideas that I'm trying to grasp are not really ideas, and the place that I'm trying to orient myself to is not really a place that I can ever live at, but I can live in that place of trying to reorient myself back to that place in spite of the fact that it's not a real place. It's real and not real at the same time. It's aniva ein bevasachas, and it's these 9 chambers of the mind which are not truly chambers, that place of ethereality, that place of imagination which is real and reality which is imaginative, that place of ratzon and tainug, of the dance between pleasure and desire, desire and pleasure, which can only be accessed in the unknowingness and the faith that represents itself farther, farther down the number line in the malchus of it all of that is emergence from this process of hitting the ma'akev, hitting the limit, and retreating backwards. Yet the limitation was not a denial of access, but rather a beckoning to re-access that which is inaccessible over and over and over again, to gain sparks of that experience, to realize odpam, I don't know. I thought I knew, I don't know. I thought I knew, I don't know. To transform from yediyah into emuna, and to sacrifice it all for the sake of emuna, which is the secret of tzaddik be'emunah so yichya. And this place of the ma'akev and the mirdaf, the mind running after something and then reaching the ma'akev and then retreating back down and finding the sidor of the moichin and the arrangement of the mind to create some graspability in this world, that's the world of Reish Lo Asyada. And that's going to be the way that a person accesses these sugyos. Because as we're going to see next week, Amir Tashem, when it comes to the heart of Reishad Lo Asyada, which is that, as we said, the very definition of how I grasp Reishad Lo Asyada is also the essence of Reishad Lo Asyada, and the essence of Reishad Lo Asyada is how I grasp Reishad Lo Asyada. And what we're going to discuss next week, Bezras Hashem, are the sveikos of Reishad Lo Asyada, the doubts of Reishad Lo Asyada, because these doubts that Rav Chaim Vital comprises and composes, these 5 doubts with regards to how is Reishad Lo Asyada actually operating, how is the moyach of the nukva, the atik yomin operating after shvira in the world of tikkun, what we find, as opposed to Rav Chaim Vital nearly everywhere else, where he tells us what it is, where he's conveying what he received from the Arizal and expressing it in graspable terms, in the heights of Kesser, in Shar Yud Gimel, the light of unity, in Shar Atik, Yud Aleph, which is Arich, no, Shar Yud Gimel, which is Arich Anpin, Shar Yud Gimel in the Echad, within the Nun Shari Bina of the Eitz Chaim. Over here, what Rav Chaim Vital switches to is the recognition that I don't remember. I don't know exactly what I heard from my Rebbe. There are sveikos over here. And not only are there sveikos, it's not an accidental form of suffix, as we're going to see. It's not I thought I knew and now I don't know, and clearly I don't know anything. But what Rav Chaim Vital describes in terms of Reish Lo Asyada, or the sveikos, the doubts that surround Reish Lo Asyada, is that yesh oid sveikos bego veloy zachisi bahen. There are more sveikos in this, and I have not been zeicha to it. We're going to see how the inner content of Reish Lo Asyada is the way of grasping HaKadosh Baruch Hu by way of Safek, which is the birthplace of Emuna, and it's also the birthplace of the Sha'ashuim and Sipo Kapnimi. But right now, we're just talking about the moichin, the lumdis necessary for reaching these places. In describing the sveikos of Reish Lo Asyada, Rav Chaim Vital writes as follows, and this is in Shar Yud Beis. He says, Klal ha'olam mikol zeh, everything that comes out from our study of these ideas is that the reason, as a result of these sveikos, we refer to Atik Yomin, that place of the Malchus of the lower world, which becomes the Kesser, Reish Lo Asyad of the higher world, which allows the Chachma, which is the Galgalta, and the Avir Dachya, and the Bina, which is the Moichas Tima'a, and the Butzina de Kardenusa to operate in unison. The reason it's called Reish Lo Asyada is because Ein Noide Ma Bechinas Yeshba. We don't know. We have sveikos with regards to what composes it. And now Rav Chaim Vital shows that this is not simply a suffix of the Arizal. This is not simply a suffix of Rashbi. This is not simply a suffix of the tzaddikim in Pnimius Torah, v'hine Yeshaya Hanavi alav hashalom. Yeshaya Hanavi, as the Ramak points out to us, nistapku gam be'elu hasfekos. Yeshaya Hanavi also had these doubts. V'alehem remez, and he gave a hint to them in this pasuk, v'hispia b'tzach sechois nafshecha, and you will be satisfied in the thirst of your soul. V'darshu b'zoyar, and we're going to see next week, Amir Tashem, in the Zohar HaKadosh, and based on the Steikos of Radla, what exactly those tzach sechos are, tzach and tzachos, the three doubts that ultimately a person has when it comes to grasping Reishad Lo Yada. But for our purposes, we see that this orientation towards Reishad Lo Yada, when Yeshaya Navi wanted to orient himself towards this place of Ani V'ayin B'vasachas, of the unity between the Butzina of Bina and the Avira of Chachma, to the flaming nature of expressivity and limitation and concealment and force of Bina, as well as the oceanic, airy sense of Bittul and Chachma, the unification that takes place, Mibein Shnei Akruvim, is going to be oriented towards the pasuk of V'hispia b'tzach suchos nafshecha, V'hispia b'tzach suchos nafshecha. And we're going to see from the Ramchal Be'ezras Hashem, but right now we'll look at Rav Menachem Mendel of Shklov, Schus Yogan Aleinu. Why is it specifically this pasuk? The pasuk, generally speaking, seems to imply that you're going to be in a state of drought, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to satisfy you in that state of doubt. But the way that Rav Menachem Mendel of Shklov says, I was thinking Rav Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, because ultimately the two of them are very often saying the same thing, which is why this biur of Mayim Adirim on the Idrazuta from Rav Menachem Mendel of Shklov was on the desk of the Divrei Chaim of Tzan, Schus Yogan Aleinu, for his entire life, and he would learn from it from day to day, because he thought, the story goes, that it was from Rav Menachem Mendel of Vitebsker, because ultimately the Gra and the Baal Shem Tov are really saying the same thing. And over here, he says, instead of reading it as you're in a state of thirst and you need to find satisfaction to that thirst because otherwise you're going to die in drought, what we see is that the drought itself is the satisfaction. V'hisbia, how are you going to find satisfaction? But in the thirst of your soul. Why is there always going to be a thirst of your soul? Zehu reisha gimel shu reisha lo yada. This is the third unknowable head, as he says in Mayim Adirim on Daf Yud Zayin. It's the secret of the Gimel Tzachzachos. It's the secret of the Sveikos. She'ein Adam Yochel Lahasik Shar Hanun Haklali. A person cannot fully come to grasp that place, because the true grasp of the Shar Hanun is the recognition that there is an infinite gradations of another Shar Hanun, another Shar Hanun, another Shar Hanun. It's not revealed beside me in the secret of who. Me is gematria 50 because it's the 50th gate. Now again, saying who is not saying I'll never have a hope of understanding who. It's continuously asking who in spite of the fact that I can't fully know who. It's the me and asking over and over, mi bara'ela. That's the secret, the questioning and the desire that rests the heart of the neshama, which is the secret of tachlis hayediyah shalei neda. The purpose of knowledge is coming to the awareness that we cannot know. But what we don't know right now is ultimately always going to be there. Be satisfied in the thirst of your soul, because al yedei zeh, through grasping that you'll never be fully satisfied, what I now think I know will be revealed to be what I didn't know in the next moment of revelation. That it's always going to be a process like this. It's always going to be a process of yearning, that I will never be satisfied. The only orientation towards satisfaction is the recognition that there will be a perpetual bikush, there will be a perpetual process. Now again, we will be able to scrub away from that process of Bina all of the symptoms of what it means to be a Bina dekamensh who only lives with bakasha, because over here in the light of Kesser, it's searching, yeah, with the bittul of Chachma. It's the radical secret of Mati v'le Mati b'vasachas. So there's a calmness at the heart of Reishad Lo Yada. As the tzaddikim said, that when it came to trying to be mevatel amalik from our lives, a segula to this is to learn the sveikos of Reishad Lo Yada. And as we come closer to the sugyas of Purim, to Adar, which is the secret of Rosh Tevos, Reishad Lo Yada, and we access this place of unknowability in our minds, we begin to really come to understand that not knowing is not a form of ignorance, but rather it's the deepest form of knowledge. It's the knowledge of faith. It's making the decision to let go of all complications of self, all egoisms, and to sacrifice it all, to give it all over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that secret of not knowing. And Be'ezras Hashem will be zochet to cultivate more of the midah of Malchus, Hagnuza Baradlah, but specifically the way that we're going to get there is the grasp that I will know it by way of not knowing it. I will be able to say the letters, I will be able to convey the ideas. And the more we say the letters and the more we convey the ideas, the more it comes into relief for us. And then, but at the end of the limud, we come to realize that it has disappeared from me. But again, that disappearance of knowledge is not now coming to say, oh, look, you wasted all your time, but rather it's coming to terms with the apex of knowledge, which is not knowing, which means that every step of knowing is illuminated with the flaming desire of faith that comes about when Bina and the Butzidah Kardanusa boil the water of the Galgalta and allow that Avira Dachya to begin to move upwards, like the Ketara smoke that goes upwards back into that secret place of Reish Lo Asyada to be Ma'ira Mashiach ben David Be'ezras Hashem.